There we go. Yeah, so how comfortable are you with the track? Yeah. Okay, so you know what's coming next, basically. Okay, that's good. That's a good start. This is. I'm going to tell you some stuff which you already know, but I'm just going to say it anyway. The reason this is hard is because it's relatively high speed, very narrow, a lot of elevation change. So really, really up and down. And there's certain corners that drop away in the middle of the corner. Some of them go up, some of them go down, some of them are blind. There's all sorts of tricky cambers and elevations, which I'm sure you've discovered. Plus, you're in a car which isn't that compliant. This Formula Ford obviously has no downforce. It's just got, no wings. Very stiff. And you're on non-slick tyres. They're treaded tyres. So you've got all the difficult stuff thrown into one. So if you can get around here for a number of laps without crashing, then I think that's an achievement. And if we can do it without crashing and be quite fast, this is like doing a 10k training race to actually train for a 5k, if you see what I mean. Like, most races and most tracks are not this hard. So if you can get pretty good at this, then other stuff should just feel easier, where you don't have weird bumps and cambers and curbs that suddenly bounce you into oblivion. A couple to all of that, I forgot to turn damage off in this session, so don't crash, because we'll have to restart from the pit lane. I only found that out when I crashed, and it didn't repair itself. And I was like, oh, crap, I didn't mean to do that. But anyway, at least there's some added jeopardy is not necessarily a bad thing. So I think I'd like to watch you drive some laps, see how you do it, and then we'll work from there. We'll see. I know we're not training for a particular race here, although maybe at the end of this session, me and you could have a bit of a pretend race, just so I can see what your positioning's like when I'm right there behind you. But yeah, I know this isn't like, you're not doing the Cadwell Park Formula Ford Championship or whatever, but let's just try and get as good as we can at this track and see where you end up, and that'll as always, that'll leave us with the areas to improve there to focus on for next time. So let's do it. Right, I'm on board with you. Yep, I'm going to just sit on board with you and watch. Let's do it. As always, if you want to talk to me, feel free, but I'll just try and keep quiet whilst I watch your first few laps. You've had enough experience in this car now to know that it's very slippery on the first couple of laps, and if you have any spins, it gets very, very oversteery as well, with the rear tyres overheating. Yeah, I did exactly that about 40 minutes ago. Just first lap cold tyres. So this should be good grippy conditions. I've made this quite cold, and low humidity and no wind and everything. So this should be pretty good grip conditions. Once the tyres are warm, it'll be good. Yeah, it's not surprising because the elevation change is massive. That's obviously called the mountain. I always forget what this section's called, but I call it the forest. I was here in real life last year, driver coaching, so I've been here quite recently. It's very accurate, this version. I think that was just a combination of still slightly cold tyres plus weight transfer. You'll probably get away with that speed in the next 2 or 3 laps. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, let's definitely talk about that. That's a really, really good topic. How you so you said how can you detect that you're about to spin earlier, didn't you? Sorry, your microphone just because you're a bit far. I've just turned you up now. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, let's talk about both those things. I'll let you carry on driving for the moment though. I would suggest resetting because I think your rear tyres are probably now overheating. You've got a bit of an imbalance between the front and rear axle because the front's still a little bit cold, the rear is now too hot. So just do another run here, but with if you don't spin, then they'll stay quite nice all the time. It should be lap 3 or 4. Let's have a look. When did I get my best times? So I started getting down to, well, actually it took me quite a while. Lap 5 I got my fastest in a run. It's not a particularly short track in this car, so let's do maybe 6 timed laps rather than 10 or something like that because it's quite long to get through a run. Nicely held. This is tricky, really, really tricky when the tyres are cold. So that was a good effort on this lap. That's okay. You spun onto the grass, so your rear shouldn't be too overheated. I'm just watching exactly why that happened. I think you just touched the grass. Your left rear tyre went on the grass, and that really, really made it slippery. So yeah, the weight transfer was a part of it, but it was escalated by having a really slippery left rear tyre. This is so hard, man. I feel so sorry for you. I can't believe I suggested this combo. It's so hard, but it's good. This is like eating your vegetables doing a session at this track. Yeah, exactly. The cake will be the skills you develop by driving at this track. You're doing some elements really well. Like, really, really well. There's some very nice accuracy. We just need to tidy up around the edges a little bit, but... Like, overall, this is looking good. It's just so easy to get caught out in the high-speed corners where there's a direction change and you have to lift off. Nice. There was a little bit more caution this time. So the one thing I'd say, for those times where we've spun in the last few laps, just remember that anytime you make an input or you remove an input, like the throttle, suddenly, the car will react suddenly as well. So when you're bleeding off the throttle, when you're coming off the gas to get the nose to turn in this car, on this track in particular, Just do it slightly more gradually. Round off the edges of your input, and then it won't suddenly put all the weight on the nose, if that makes sense. So when you lift off for those corners, for example, instead of like snapping off like you would in a Formula 4 car or something with stiffer springs and stickier tyres, just be a little bit more rounded in how smoothly you come off the throttle, for example. And then it won't. Then the car won't suddenly react and and lose all rear grip all at once. It'll transfer the weight more gradually. This is stuff that you're doing subconsciously anyway. It's just that's lovely through there. Yeah, nice, really decent. That was a really nice solid lap there. Let's keep going from there. And now we have some tyre temperature as well, so you've got a little bit more of a safety net of some stickier tyres. This is good. And they're not overheated either. Oh, well done for keeping out the wall. Well done. I'm just watching it back. I think you thought you were going too fast, so you didn't turn in, and then when you turned in, you had to turn quite sharply because you went in very late, and then you touched the grass when you went deep. That's what the reason it suddenly spun around is because you went so deep it touched the grass. But I think you could have probably got away with turning in slightly earlier, and you would have been okay. Let's get a few more on the board, so we've got a nice bit of data to use. You need to come over and drive this track for real. You'll love it. It's quite north, quite far north in England. It's a really beautiful area. I stayed in a lovely Airbnb when I was here last year. Very, very countryside and rural. Nice accuracy there. Yeah, nicely anticipated with the braking there. That was good. Okay, so this looks like the fastest clean lap so far. Let's do a couple more. That was very smooth into there. This is great to watch so far, Jing. This is a good lap. Oh, nice. That was good. You lifted earlier that time and managed to stay tighter. Right, let's do one more. Then we'll have a short break. But great stuff. Nice improvement on that lap. Well controlled. Oh, just a little bit greedy with the entry speed into that final corner. I was waiting for you to lift, and the lift came like when after you had to, but still a big improvement. So I would just stop anywhere there. I still think that's a really, really decent effort. Like, that was nice. We've got something to work with there. So we'll use that as our lap to watch back. So I'm just going to rewind to the beginning of that one. There we go. So I'll pause that there. Right. So before I dive into that lap, let's just address the questions that you had for me. So let's go for... So you said how... You had one question which was how to tell more of like a sense of speed, which is... Yeah, and that's connected to the first one. And you said how do you tell earlier when you're going to spin? I guess so you can like do something about it. So this is like a multi-part answer, but tell me if this sounds rubbish. So first of all, you know that you're pretty much always, in certain situations, you're always in danger of a spin. So when you're entering a corner and you're decelerating, you know that there's certain things that can cause a spin. So going in too fast and trying to decelerate, whilst turning the steering wheel, you're trying to still make the corner because otherwise you're going to drive straight ahead into a wall. So you've still got to turn, but you've gone in too fast and you're having to slow down. So by doing that, obviously there's a danger of a spin. And going into any corner on the limit, which means nearly too fast, there's a danger that you could carry just a bit too much speed, and that combination of you decelerating and turning the steering wheel, which causes some of the deceleration, is going to make the rear end want to go straight on and spin you around. And coupled to that, you know which kind of car you're in. So if you're in a car with an engine behind you, you're more likely to be in a position on the way into a corner where you might experience a momentum spin because you've got weight behind you that wants to keep going straight. If you turn the nose in and there's any loss of grip on the rear, that weight behind you will just go straight, which from your point of view is a spin because your nose goes in and the rear keeps going straight on, and then obviously that spins you around. So you're not driving blind. Like, you know what car you're in, and you've probably driven other laps in that car, so you know what to kind of expect that car's handling traits to be. And conversely to that, if you're in like a big long car with all the weight out on the nose and quite a light rear end, normally you'd expect less danger of entry oversteer, but maybe more danger of spinning on the throttle on the exit because you've got less traction and all the weight's on the front, and so the rear can break away. But probably on the way into a corner, the nose will go in and the rear will just follow because there's not any kind of momentum or pendulum following you into the corner. So that's the starting point. So I haven't really answered the question yet, but the background is known to you. So when we're driving this car into, say, turn 1, or turn 2, sorry, like the right-hander where you had a couple of spins, and I have as well, you know you're carrying speed in, you know the front's going to go in, and you're probably trailing the brakes or braking as you're turning in. So you're in this, mentally you should be like prepared for oversteer might happen now, because the things I'm doing are the things that will give you oversteer on entry. So you should basically be primed, like your driving brain should be ready to react to what the car does on this lap. Because your inputs aren't going to be exactly the same every time. You might have braked a tiny bit later, you might have put a bit more pressure in, you might have turned in at a slightly different point. There's so many factors that could cause it to spin on this lap when it didn't spin on the previous lap. But you know all those things, and you're experiencing them in real time. So if you go into turn 1, in a split second after you've hit the brakes, normally you know, that was too late or too early, or that felt a bit right, or the car is doing what I expected it to do. And as you start applying the steering lock, you're like monitoring it the entire time. Is it doing what I'm telling it to do, or is it doing it more than I'm telling it to do? So if you turn into turn 2 here, and suddenly it's turning more than you wanted, like you can see, visually you see the car is rotating more than you want, and if you were really driving it in real life, you'd feel that G-force. It's difficult to describe exactly how it acts on you, but you feel rotation in your inner ear, I guess, longer than you wanted, or more quickly than you wanted it to feel. So those things should prime you to, I might now need to be ready to correct or come completely off the brakes or gas or whatever's causing the problem, but definitely, almost certainly, respond with some quick opposite lock. So you're in a situation where you know it's probably about to happen, and then you're monitoring in real time, is it happening? Do I need to do something about it? Sorry, carry on, ask a question.
That's a good point. My question, that answered my question. But like here, I don't sense that rotation.
Yeah.
I only have visual signals.
Yeah.
Some feedback will, of course. What I'm trying to do is exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Give me certain amount of input. How can I tell? Like I have a disconnect. I don't have a good mapping in my brain of what signal I can receive here to compare. Hey, is this too much than what I expect to do, or too little? I don't have that map.
Okay, so in terms of what the steering wheel will give you, generally it might be slightly too late to necessarily fix it with this input alone, or with this information alone, but the specific thing you're trying to feel from your steering wheel through your direct drive that tells you I'm about to go into an oversteer slide, which then might develop into a spin, like oversteer is beginning. What you should feel is the wheel being pulled out of your hand in the opposite direction to where you're turning. So I can't take my wheel off to show you because it's locked in position, but if you're turning in and you're feeling like when you turn, say you turn right on iRacing, there's some resistance to you turning. So it takes effort to turn the wheel. It's like the wheel is pulling back on you. If it feels like it's getting really pulled the other way out of your hands, that is the sensation of oversteer's beginning. So essentially, if I'm trying to put this into words, but yeah, if it's loaded up one way, you're having to basically like push against the resistance. But then if it suddenly starts to if that resistance starts to almost unweight in the opposite direction, like what you would feel if you were to let go, the steering wheel would obviously snap round the other way. If you feel that to any significant degree, that is that's the sim telling you the same information that a real car would tell you, which is that the car relative to the steering wheel, it's so hard to do this over this little camera, the car relative to the steering wheel is like pivoting towards straight, if that makes sense. So like right now you're turning and the car is facing one way and the wheels are facing the other way, and that difference is what's making the rest of the car turn. But if the car is pivoting around the steering axis, it's kind of coming to straight. So actually it feels like the steering wheel's going light in that direction, because relative to you, the car is moving, even though you're in the car, relative to your steering angle, the car is moving straight. Obviously, if it then carries on past that, that's when it goes into a spin. But that's what you're feeling through the steering wheel. But like I said a moment ago, that's probably not enough in isolation for you to make a quick enough reaction, because you're certainly not consciously like concentrating on exactly how much steering effort does this feel like, oh, now it's changed, I should do something. That's kind of a nice little cue for you. But in the background, there are other things, like visually, as you know, if you're in a constant radius corner and you're expecting the scenery to stay at a particular angle, but suddenly it starts rotating more, and you're seeing more of the inside grass than you meant to, you know, like, that's a pretty obvious one. You know the car is spinning because you weren't telling it to go to that grass. You were telling it to go to the bit that's in front of you. It's that coupled with those two things, coupled with, you know, in certain situations, it's very likely to try and get sideways because of the weight transfer. So, for example, as I said to you whilst you were driving, if you're turning and you suddenly lift off the gas, so if you're on constant throttle and you go bam off the gas, it's probably going to make a big weight transfer to the nose, and it's almost certainly going to react like momentarily. Like, you know, if I do this, it's going to do this. So you're like ready for it to happen, and then you get the cues of the steering feel changing and the visual scenery changing, and they happen at the same time. But the biggest factor out of all of these things is preempting it. Like, I know if I'm pushing hard into a corner and I'm braking late, or if I've committed to throttle and I suddenly have to lift to try and cure understeer, for example, like in fact, if I just fast forward your lap here, so I don't know if you can you see my screen now, yeah? Yeah, so here, right now, if you were to lift over the crest of a hill, you know you're going over a crest, so that's one thing. I know that if I'm going over a rise like that, the rear is going to get light. If I, at the same time, lift off the accelerator, and I've got steering angle on, and the engine's behind me, all those things are going to add up to probably make it get sideways. I know that before it's happened. So when I make it happen, I'm ready to catch it. You know, I'm ready. It's not a surprise. Like, you shouldn't ever be caught by surprise by a spin or oversteer unless you've touched the grass and you just didn't know. But even in that situation, you know you're near the grass. So it shouldn't be that big a surprise. It might happen when you didn't think you were actually touching it, but at least it's not like, whoa, why did that happen? It's kind of, all these factors are, you're not suddenly plonked into the car and told, go. Like, you've driven it round to get to this point. You know the track, you know what the car feels like, and you know in general, in driving dynamics, when you do X, Y happens. So I don't know whether that's a very good answer, but that is certainly the way I look at it. Yep. Why you spun could be for lots of reasons, though. So although I've given you an indication there of how you would predict you might be at risk of spinning, that doesn't necessarily answer why exactly did you spin in a particular situation. So if I go back to like one of these other laps that you did, I'm just going to like fast forward round and see if we have a spin on any particular. I will answer the second part of your question in a minute. I think it was the lap before this where we spun in. So this is one, right? Here we go. So this is turn 2, I guess. So we can probably work out why we spun here. Okay, that one is a relatively easy one to judge. So we were out wide on the dirt. We then got on the grass, and the rear came around. And if I listen, I know you can't hear this. Let me listen on board. Yeah, you went down a gear at roughly the same time, and obviously you're beginning to turn right as well. So you've got right hand steering, left rear tyre touching the grass, and even if it's not on the grass, it's on the marbles out here, and you go down a gear. All those things are causing like a weight transfer, and at the same time you need some grip on that tyre to cope with the weight transfer. It's had all the grip taken away. So that's one example, but obviously each one is for a slightly different reason. There was one that happened later, I don't know if it's even on this lap, but this was into the mountain. Oh, here's another one. What happened on this one? Okay, so this one was a pendulum effect of the rear. We've gone in a little bit deep to the right. This is called the gooseneck, this corner. We've gone a little bit deep to the right. That means this left corner is quite tight, and you've just had weight transfer go from the right to the left, and we're about to then swing the other way, and it's like a pendulum. You know, it's gone one way, then the other way, and you didn't have enough room to have straighter steering because you'd approached the corner quite tight here. So all of those things together, and you got on the power here, and then lifted here. So again, weight transfer, and the track dips down there. So weight transfer plus a bit of a dip, which puts even more weight on the nose. All those things together, and the engine being at the back, are why that happened. So you're fighting against all these factors all the time. It's hard. There's so many things to take on board, but that's why it's a miracle that most of the time people aren't spinning all the time. But that's because you're making inputs which don't induce as much of a slide as that. But sorry, ask that second part again.
Yeah, like this. Let me know follow up on this part. Since like I can see the grass,
Yeah.
but I realize when I'm driving, like I don't have like I spend so much of my energy focused on where's the impact, where I'm going.
Yeah.
Like it's harder for me to get it with sensory. I have triple monitors.
Yeah.
Just means that hey, a lot of time I go, I'm spinning before I'm spinning, but that's already too late.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get it as early as possible so I can fix it.
And sometimes there is nothing you can do. Like sometimes it is just too late. I'm going to give you an example of that. I think it's probably from my first lap today. Like I've got a lot of experience. I've done a lot of laps. Oh, it's not going to show me because I had some kind of weird computer failure, which is very unusual for me. Where did I spin? I definitely spin. This is my practice earlier. I definitely have a spin or a crash at some point soon. And sometimes, despite all of that prediction and despite all of that foreknowledge and all the experience, there's a point at which it's too late. Right, here we go. Here's my spin that caused me to crash. So the reason this happened is because I went over this curb a bit hard on throttle. It bounced there. So the rear, you see this tyre here goes bounce there, hits the curb. It's off the floor. That starts it going. And although I go pretty much straight to opposite lock, in fact, if I just move the camera down slightly, you'll be able to see it better. So I'm pretty much straight to maximum opposite lock. That's it. There's nothing more I can do. The momentum is bringing the rear around. So the only thing I'd say is I was really risking it by using that much curb. I was also on throttle, so I caused it by being too hard on the throttle. Yeah, so next lap, what do you think I did? I used less curb and didn't get on the gas as hard. And that's it. You as long as you learn from it and you don't do that every lap, then it's fine. Like it doesn't matter that you had to spin in the practice because you learned from it. The point I know you'd rather not spin, but that's why you build up. That's why you go bit by bit by bit. And obviously I wasn't building up here. I was just going straight into it, pushing crazy hard because it didn't matter because it's a practice session that doesn't count.
And the time that when you apply opposite lock, when you apply that quickly, is because
That's a really, really good question. Right, okay, so if we haven't ever done this, we should do this now. And I'm going to show you this entire lap up to the crash of where I'm looking at any given point. So my cursor isn't that bright. It should be like bright red or something so I can show you. But I'll try and show you like in slow-mo where I'm looking all the time here. So I'm looking over here at the turning point, and obviously I've got my peripheral vision looking all the time. So now I'm over here, but I'm using peripheral vision to look back at the my positioning. So now I'm looking over here, looking as far around as I can get. I'm looking like up here. So my vision is like where I'm going next, and just before I get to that point, my vision switches to the next place, and my peripheral vision, or I guess like lower peripherals, because peripherals not just the side, it can be like above and below as well. So my focus is on the place I'm going to next, But like I say, just before I get there, that focus shifts to the next place I'm going, and that peripheral vision, whether it's up, down, left, or right, takes over the final guidance. It's almost like autopilot in a plane. That like I'm not having to stare at the edge of the I'm not looking here right now. I'm not having to stare here to stop me going over that white line. I'm looking over here, but my peripheral vision's judging how close to the edge I am. And obviously, if you get right near the edge, you feel the rumble of the edge as well. So you've got an extra sensation there too. But let's just fast forward up to the next corner a little bit. We'll go in slow-mo again. So even though I can't see it, I'm looking for my turning point. I'm looking for it. I've seen it. Now I'm switching to the apex, and my peripheral vision is taking over that turning point. Now I know I'm headed to the apex. I'm looking at the exit. Now I know I'm going to get to the exit. I'm looking round the next corner. So all of the stuff that's happening now is being dealt with by peripheral vision. What's happening in a moment is the focus. So I'm like looking round the corner here. That's my turning point. Now I've flicked over to the next apex. Turning points dealt with by peripheral. I know I'm repeating myself, but this is the pattern. So now I can't see where I'm going after this. So I do look at the apex. Now I'm looking at the next apex. Now the exit. And the moment I can, boom, down to the next turning point. Now I'm looking at the next apex because I can tell I'm headed towards that turning point. So I'm looking around here. Now the exit. So you're just like, your focus should be one step ahead of where you actually are right now. So your focus is on the next thing you're about to do. And this is something that all pro race drivers would do. If you put an eye tracker on them, and I've seen people do this, this is exactly what they do. They're always looking for exactly what I'm saying. The next point you're going to, when you're nearly there, you look for the next point you're going to go to. When you're nearly there, you look to the next point. It's like a few moments before your vision snaps up to the next thing. So I'll tell you where I'm looking when I have this crash, because I don't know yet. Until I get there, I'm not sure. So this is going to be interesting for me. So I'm looking over here, next apex, and then next apex. Yes, this answers the question, Jing. We have just answered the question by me voicing this out. The reason I know the car is rotating more than I want it to is because it's relative to where I want it to head. And I want it to head over there, so my focus is locked on this little orange thing over here. So because I'm looking there, and now it's turning left more, I'm still looking over there. Do you see what I mean? So I can tell that I'm straying from the trajectory I want is straying from what's happening in reality. And because I'm not looking down, if I was looking down at the front of the car here, you wouldn't know because you're looking down here.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
When I look down at the very front of the car, it's very hard for me to tell.
Yes.
Not until it's too late, right?
Yeah. So because I'm looking up here, you've got like a locked point in the distance that you're referring to subconsciously. So you see where my hands are going. Like this is, I love digging into the weeds like this, and I love that you like the detail too. Watch where my hands go. My hands are pointing the front wheels towards that orange thing, regardless of what happens to the car. So if I go super slow-mo, so I want to aim at that, and the moment the car rotates more than that, look where my hands are going. They're going here. It's pointing to that, because that's where I want it to go. Now I've given up. Well, I haven't given up. It's just, there's nothing more I can do. I'm at maximum. But at all stages of that oversteer moment, where the wheels are pointed is relative to this, like where my vision is, where I want the car to go. It's there. It's there. So as it rotates more here, it's very obvious to my driving subconscious brain that it's not going where I want to go, and so I'm having to fix it or try, and obviously I fail in this instance because the momentum carries it on. But yeah, that's it. We've answered the question there by kind of running it through. It's looking up to the next place you're going all the time and not relying on... I mean, I've never put an eye tracker on you. I've never seen. For all I know, you might be doing exactly what I've been describing. Or you might be doing what most people do when they're relatively new to track driving, which is look a bit too close. Like look at the ground somewhere in front, or look at where you are imminently headed, and then look up at the last minute. A lot of people do this in real life. They'd be looking down here, and it's only when they actually get to that place, like now they'll look for the next place. But that's too late if you want to be supremely accurate, because you means you're like slightly delayed in your guidance and in the information you've got for situations like that. You can basically see, you can see where those front tyres are. You see how they're still going towards the orange, like you can see it there.
Before you change the angle inside the cockpit to show the wheel, I can
until now when it runs out of lock and it has to continue pivoting. There's a point here where I now can't turn it any further, and then it pivots round on itself. But yes, that's it.
Like usually in this same situation, I will turn opposite a lock much later.
Yeah, okay.
I know that I'm pretty much halfway in already. Then I will,
Yeah, and you saw even in this instance, doing it that early, it still wasn't early enough. But that's because the problem wasn't getting the lock off quick enough. The problem was I went in too fast and I hit the curb too hard. That's it. Like, or I got on the power too hard and hit the curb too hard. So, but if you've got this in your armory, if you've got this defense against oversteer or spins in your armory, and what I mean by this, I mean the looking into the distance and having that clear reference point for your driving brain to refer against, 100% that will make you cure things earlier or fix them before they develop into something worse.
yeah. My goal is not using this completely limited spin.
Yeah.
Just like you said, if I curve too much, I can slice next one. Right?
Yep.
Instead of having the tool of at least try to make the spin situation better.
I'm going to look at. We should look at one of yours. We should look at an example of, because I think on this lap, yeah, okay. So on this lap we have a spin. This might not be, this one might not have been fixable by what we've just been talking about. But let's just have a look. So this is where we go. Yeah, and even then though, we probably could be very critical and say, let's just zoom in slightly more actually if my my keyboard has enough battery. So, yeah, look at where the front wheels are pointed. Even though we want to be pointing here, but we're not. Although you are doing opposite lock now, it's too little, too late. And even though yes, the reason for the spin, the predominant reason in this instance was yes, we turned in too late, we got too deep, we got out on the dirt, and this was this was all a bit dirty and slippery out here. But you still could have not spun. Like you could have made the initial mistake here, but still ended up just facing the right way. Yeah, exactly. And if your steering lock had been relative to where you want to go, which in this instance is here, we know that's our next point. You'd be angled there already, and you can just see that they're not. It's facing that way. So partly it's because it pivoted so fast. So to be fair to you, because you got on the grass, it snapped around. So, but even there though, you could still be facing a bit more to the right. Like the wheels could be that way a bit. So you might not have been able to save it. A bit like I couldn't save my one, but it would have helped. And actually, even earlier than that, we probably wouldn't have been in that situation if you'd been looking slightly further ahead. Like if we'd been looking around here, I'd have been turning towards that anyway. You were, for some reason, you delayed the steering. I think because you thought you were going a bit too quick. But funnily enough, I think in this situation, because you've got this very steeply banked apex, you'd have probably made it fine. Because it's kind of like, almost like NASCAR banking. You can send it in there a bit too fast. And actually it gets less banked when you're wider out to the edge. So you probably had less deceleration ability by not turning. In a normal corner, if you think you're going way too quick, yeah, you kind of go straighter for longer so you can stay harder on the brakes for longer. But in this situation, yeah, we didn't. But yeah, it definitely wouldn't hurt. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I make sense. Can we do the replay? Yeah, just like the half speed, and we'll just go through this corner really quickly. Because now I
Yeah.
can see using my eye now, right?
Yeah, so
Look like where your cursor is.
yeah.
And then now I should switch to the next one.
Yeah.
But I didn't do it. Oh, I already. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I can totally see that now.
Does it make sense? Like where that cursor is, it's like it makes sense as that's probably where we should be looking because that's where we want to be going in a moment. Like it really, really makes it obvious what the car is doing relative to it, doesn't it? This might be quite a important thing we've somehow failed to cover actually, Jing. I should have spoken to you about this earlier. This is one of those things that I do cover with people, but I might have thought we'd done it and then we just never did. Or because your progress was good, I just assume you're doing it and maybe it's not. So it won't be like a light switch. This won't be like suddenly you're 5 seconds a lap quicker or something. But it's definitely something as a fundamental thing to be on top of. And we should be doing it. And so even if you have to do it quite consciously to begin with, it will be a real positive to all of your driving, because when stuff's happening even quicker, this is only a Formula Ford on little Cadwell Park. It's important, but if you're on like a Formula One track in an F3 car or whatever, it's all the same stuff, and stuff can happen more quickly. And having a very clear reference of where your eyes are and therefore where you want the car to be going, and that something to then compare what it's actually doing to, will be, it will definitely help. It's maybe where the final few tenths are, because you're quite quick now. You're not driving around like badly, but this might unlock a bit, might unlock a little bit of extra pace.
I remember I asked that question before we talked about it, where the eye function is, but I don't remember really connect the dots of
Yeah.
using the eye to help me to try to at least recover from a potential spin.
Yes, or stop it before it happens.
Yeah.
It might feel weird though, like forcing yourself to look further ahead. What I'd say as a starting point, where I'm saying look to the turn-in point just before we get there, switch to the apex, just before we get there, switch to the exit, just before we get there, switch to the next turn-in point. That's quite a lot of words and quite a lot of stuff to try and remember. As a starting point, I'd say this is what people say. I hear other driver coaches say this phrase quite a lot. Just lift your vision and look as far into the distance as you can, basically. As far as you can see, within reason, look there. And if you can narrow that down to specifically the next turning point, the next apex, the next exit, the next turning point, the next apex, the next exit, that's the ideal. But as a starting point, just look as far ahead as you can, and that will kind of at least put you in the right area.
And do you actively think about your peripheral vision when you are, we're gonna look at the next thing right before we get into the current apex rate, but you're actively.
No, I've never actively thought about doing it until someone said to me, "How do you do it? What is it you're doing?" And then when I had to do like this, use my cursor and point, and then I used an eye tracking machine on myself at a simulator place near Silverstone years ago. I then saw, this is what I'm doing. I'm not thinking about it, but it's what I'm doing. And then when I used the same machine on other pro race drivers, they're all doing the same thing. They've never once thought about it. It's just how they've developed. It's almost like in order to go as quick as you possibly can, it's a thing that has to happen. It's almost like an emergent property of fast driving, but it really helps to know it up front because at least you can be aware of it. So, and for some people it doesn't come naturally. Some people could do track days or racing for years and years and years and never actually do it like this until they're told. So it's not like everybody comes to the right conclusion.
Especially in real life, right? You have a much more different type of signals. You can feel the car is about to spin. You can do all of those things.
Yeah.
And we actually help people to not develop this because they can use other signals.
Yeah, something I didn't mention, but I've just realised because I just did it with my cursor, which I should show you, is there's one extra little layer to this. So it's not just as simple as look at the next turning point just before you get there, switch. There is scope to look back at the thing which you were previously looking at. So, for example, when I'm going into this corner, I'll be looking at this turning point. Just before we get there, I'll be looking at the apex. But just before I commit to that apex, my vision subconsciously flicks back to the turning point and then back to the apex again, almost as like a final check. Am I still definitely going towards the turning point? Yes, good. Now I can like get on with the next part. So I'll show you what I mean. So I'm like, there is super slow-mo. I'm looking here. Now I'm looking here. So my peripheral vision is still looking at those orange cones, but I'm focused here. Now I'm like here. And then I'm locked onto this one. Do you see what I mean? It's like a final check. As long as you still go back to the next destination before you commit to it. So turning point here, I'm over here, like that. It's almost like a little flick back, just to check your maths, almost, just to check your peripheral vision hasn't got it wrong somehow. You don't have to do that, but it's something that I notice myself doing suddenly sometimes. So anyway, there we go. That's an
And now I get to the second question.
no. Let's do it.
About the sensation of speed.
Yeah, 100%.
For example, now when we go through these few corners, we have that relatively long street.
Yeah,
And the street is a right hand turn.
yeah,
And now it's right. So I remember you mentioned this before. Like in real world, when you're driving, you know your speed gonna go through this corner. Now, of course, on the street, I don't drive like this close. Even
yeah, yeah.
here, when I'm sitting here, I feel like it's hard for me to get a sense of my speed. I have to use a lot of more visual references.
Yeah. So you're right. You are missing information. So there's various things which you would have in real life which you don't have here. So first of all, a realistic feeling of the wind resistance. You know, in real life you've got, despite how good iRacing sound and stuff is, in real life this is a very minor part of this, by the way, but I'm going to build on this. In real life, you feel the drag, you feel the buffeting, and the faster you go, like there's a sensation that I'm pushing through a fluid of the air. Next, you've got increased frequency of vibrations the faster you go. So unless you're sitting in a rig with loads of transducers on it that like vibrate faster and faster and faster and faster as you go quicker, you're not experiencing that. In real life, if you're driving slowly, you feel a certain frequency of, like, I don't know, the tire on the floor or yeah, like the general hum of the cockpit. And the faster you go, those vibrations increase. And when you're going really fast, it's like a high frequency, bzzz, like buzz. So that's a bit of a cue. Plus, you've got the speed of objects going past you, which is a really, really big one, which we do have to a certain degree here because we're both using triple screens. So that's one of the beauties of the triples is we do have objects coming up to our peripheral vision and then disappearing. And obviously, the faster that's happening, the higher the rate of that, that's quite a clear cue. Plus, you've got the sound of the engine. So in sim or in real life, I appreciate with gears, you can have high revs at a low speed or high revs at a high speed. But if you're in a high gear and the revs are high, that's quite a good indicator that you're going fast. And when you brake hard and the revs drop, obviously before you change to the next gear, that's giving you a sensation of how quickly that speed is bleeding away. Now, all of that stuff is really, really hard to figure out consciously. It has to be like a connected group of inputs that your driving brain is getting that work together to build this picture of how fast am I actually going.
Yeah, like for example, now I have the peripheral, I can try to practicing pay more attention on the peripheral on the stuff that are flying away from me.
Yeah,
But
like,
right now here,
yeah,
yeah, I know I'm driving in the high speed of this car, right? Like this spot on the track,
yeah.
right? I know, but like how can what is the best beside like let's say if I don't use people who on the board on the track.
Yeah.
I want to feel the sense of, hey, after a few laps, where should I stop? Like, it's harder for me to find the breaking point if I don't
Okay.
use some visual reference.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of, so this is a slightly different question because knowing exactly how fast you're going or having the best possible sensation of speed doesn't necessarily connect with where you brake, but where you pick a braking point. I'm about to state the obvious here, but it depends on how fast you're going and how tight the corner is coming up and the car itself, you know, what kind of grip level we've currently got in this car. It's partly trial and error. So partly, first of all, you know the corner's not full throttle. So when you first leave the pits and you've never seen a track before and you've never driven the car before, you're still not starting in a vacuum. You still know that cars in general cannot take every corner at full throttle. And you know that, okay, this car I can see from where I'm sitting, doesn't have any wings and doesn't have very wide tyres. So I've got a bit of a reference of roughly the kind of grip level I'm dealing with here. So again, I've said this from the beginning of our session today, but you've got some prior information, so you're not having to guess some of this stuff. But you also don't know exactly how much grip you've got, and you don't know exactly how tight this corner is until you get there. Obviously, once you've driven it a few times, you've got a fair idea of what the angle is. But what you tend to do is brake where it feels roughly right, as in where you're not taking the mickey and you're going to obviously go straight off at the next corner. So you brake at some point before you get to the corner, a few hundred meters, and you start off doing it conservatively. And if you easily make the corner, next time we brake a bit later, and when you eventually come to a quite an accurate, okay, this feels like the latest I can brake without running wide in the middle or on the exit of the corner, then I would start looking around for what are the visual references nearby. So in this example, it feels like maybe it's this board. So let's have a look on mine. Let's see what I'm using, because I have no idea. Because I'm terrible for this. I've probably told you this before. I don't really use visual references that much. I go on, and I know this is what you're getting at. And I don't. You know how a moment ago we uncovered a thing when I just did it and then looked at what I was doing. Let's see if I can figure it out here. So partly, this isn't really a fair question here, because I'm not doing this for the first time, and I have driven this track loads of times, so I do have a good feel for how far before the corner this combination of vehicle, weight, brakes, tyres, tyre temperature, I've just got a good feel for what I can get away with. But also, I'm not looking at this board and going, right, I'm going to brake at the board or 2 meters before the board. Didn't even know there were boards here. If you'd asked me without me seeing this, are there any reference points for this corner, I wouldn't have known, because I'm never looking at them. But I am seeing them, even though I'm not looking at them. My peripheral vision is using them as how quickly is that object approaching. And I've got a good feel for if an object is approaching me this quick, how quickly can I shave speed off in this car? Could I stop before I hit that, for example? If I had to stop before I hit that board, could I do it? My brain knows roughly whether that's realistic or not. So it's using that to judge how long I've got to brake. This isn't a great answer, though, because it's very difficult for you to then apply this. This is why I don't like giving these more subjective answers. Like with the cursor eye tracking, I can give you quite an objective answer of where you should be looking. With how you feel the braking distances, this is much harder.
Because like so much of what I end up doing is I guess I will go through labs after labs, but really the trial and error of finding visual references.
Yeah.
And I know, like you mentioned, and which I think is a much better way, because now using visual reference is now solely rely on it to start building a sensation of what the car is doing.
I tell you what, I'm going to add another visual reference to you, which is always there, because I think when you ask me questions like this, it genuinely helps me understand why I do a certain thing, which then helps me next time tell someone else. I'm going to add a visual reference that I never really thought about having, but running this replay through a few times, I've kind of figured it out. So I've got these. I said I'm not really using them. I'm using them to gauge the speed that I'm traveling, but I'm not using them to say brake at that thing. The visual reference yeah, and a lot of people do that. Even some pro race drivers will tell you that's what they do. The visual reference I'm really using is the apex, because that's there all the time. The corner, not even necessarily the apex, the corner that I'm approaching is a fixed reference point that I'm looking at. I already told you my eyes are down here, and I'm looking at how fast am I approaching that, and at the angle I'm currently at, do I assess that I can carry this speed through this angle? And now a lot of whether the answer is yes or no is based on experience. You need to know what the grip level of this car is like by doing it a few times, by getting used to it. But the thing I'm looking at is that. I'm not looking at these. We've already said my cursor's down here, and I'm seeing my approach speed to that apex. And when I assess that that's fine, that's when I'm looking up at the next thing. You know, when I know, yeah, I'm going to make that fine, that's when I give my brain gives me the permission to look up at the next thing. So the thing that I'm judging myself against is, am I going too fast to guide the car there? If I'm sliding slightly wide and I can see, you know, my cursor's here, but the car is moving away from there, then I know, okay, that's too fast. That's how I'm judging too fast or too slow. It's not, that's difficult back on the straight here because you don't know at this point. So that doesn't really give you a braking point, but having done it a few times, that builds the brake point, because really, ultimately, I want to get to here at the highest possible speed. And if I can get there too easily, if I'm looking there and it just goes there without any effort, you know, with no feeling of sliding on the front, it just goes there, that gives me a cue that I probably could have braked later. So next time I'll brake later. It's not a case of how close did I brake to this white board. It's how accurate was I when I got to the apex. That's kind of, and there's other factors too, how you trail the brakes in, etc. But how well you trail the brakes and all that kind of thing, they're irrelevant if you braked way too late. You're not going to be able to do any of that. And they're not necessary if you brake too early. So the fact that I'm being forced to trail a little bit to keep the trajectory there, that's all positive cues for me that I've probably braked as late as I could, if that makes sense.
So, and that back into the original question, which is part of the reason I asked, which is like when you said like at the time you were turning, my current speed, do I think I'd be able to make the corner?
Yeah.
And it seems like from what you mentioned, the way you tell your current speed is how fast things will approach, either is the board on the side or the impact itself.
Yes. In fact, you've got both. My peripheral vision is telling me how fast I'm going past these boards because I'm not looking at them. What, you know, I would, if I was looking here, I would almost certainly go off when I got to the corner, because my brain needs time to calculate the speed that I'm doing as I approach this apex, and it's changing all the time. So if I'm looking at that from all the way back here, I've got all this time to process, was I going to make it or not? Rather than if I was looking at a braking reference here, and then suddenly look up at the corner. It's almost like the corner is a surprise, even though I know it's coming. The exact distance, the exact trajectory, all of that kind of thing, you're having to look up, focus on it, and figure it out all in a split second. I couldn't do that, and actually it's amazing to me that some drivers could be looking here and then look up. I couldn't do it. It actually makes me feel sick when I try and do that, because I'm over here before I'm looking there now, all this way in. So it's what the car is doing and what it allows me to do relative to the place I want to go. And then the marker boards at the side become a speed reference, a peripheral vision, objects flying past me reference. That doesn't mean to say I never ever use them, because I would fine tune. So if I knew, say I make this corner easily at a set speed, or I seem to consistently make it, but the track conditions change, or the car tyre condition changes, for example. We're talking more like in a slick tyre endurance race or something like that. I would start to pay a bit more conscious attention to, I know I'm braking here, but what's that near to? Is that a fraction of a second after I pass that marker board? If so, then okay, at least that's a bit of an objective point that I can move a little bit forward from or a little bit back from. But I'm not staring at it. I'm still doing that peripherally. It's like you almost count. You go past the thing and you count like a split second, like a moment. You count one moment or whatever that happens to be. It's like I'm sure you could measure it in tenths of a second, but in my mind it's like now. You know, it's like that is just a subjective distance marker.
Yeah, that, if you go back for like a 2 seconds, and basically what I want to see that right about you lift off and hit the brake. At that time, your eyes mainly on the.
Yeah, so I'll go in slow-mo. So I'm looking here. Now I've switched to here. So I'm looking over here all the time. Because I can still see I'm going straight down that white line. Yeah, the white line is quite a clear thing for your peripheral vision to see. So as I'm going down here, I can still see. I could draw you a line of where my peripherals, I can still see this pretty clearly all the way down here. It's only when it vanishes off to the side here it's gone, if that makes sense. So, but yeah, you're right. I'm braking whilst not remotely looking at a braking point. I'm looking over here because I can. Yeah, sorry, I moved the cursor there, so I didn't want you to think I was looking down in the cockpit. Yeah, this entire time I'm over here, and it's only now I've gone up to the exit, and now I'm looking round here for what the next place is. Cause
So the entire time, yes, your main focus, right? Because we're vision, we'll see the boards. Your main focus. During the time, I can see in the corner of your screen where you're applying the brake, right?
yeah.
All period of time you're looking at it.
Yes, and that is, as we've uncovered in this session, partly because I'm judging, is this going correctly or not? As in, am I going the right speed, which is not too fast, not too slow? I'm judging that based on my trajectory versus the apex, where I want to go. And that's how, you know, if you've tried to get there and you can see you're not going to get there, you know instinctively almost that's understeer. I'm experiencing understeer because I wanted it to go over there and it's not going over there. If I'm angled further past the inside of it, I know this is oversteer because I shouldn't be able to see over here. I should, you know, my cursor is, I mean, I've not got any oversteer here to show you really, but it's the course of the vehicle relative to this fixed point that my eyes are looking at. That really is quite a big deal.
Absolutely, and it's so hard for me to do it, not only because, of course, like practice, but also I'm looking right in front of the car.
Yeah.
That make it harder to get that sense. Yeah. You know, the reason I was asking about the sense of speed and like where you apply the braking force is like Formula One race we watch. Right?
Yeah.
They drive in the ranks.
Yeah.
I was like, how can they tell?
Yeah. Yeah, because they don't have the same reference point, do they? Like, they can't brake at the same point, and they, on the first lap in the rain, they don't all just crash because they had to guess. They've got context of, okay, I know I'm going to have to brake earlier, and I know I'm going to have to brake softer, and yeah, there's just a feel. They will be, I bet they couldn't explain it to you very well, because most pro race drivers, people who get to F1 level, most of them won't have ever had to do any coaching or voice why they're doing a thing necessarily. They just know they do it right, and the data shows they do it right, and it's assumed that they do it right. But I'm sure they're doing all the stuff we've just been speaking about. I'm sure they're doing that, and it's because they're judging the speed of that F1 car relative to where they want it to go. And if it doesn't do that, then there's a reason, and then they'll tune where they braked, or how much speed they allowed it to carry in, or where exactly they turned in. All those factors, they'll just tune them to allow it to go to that place where their eye is telling them it should be going. Yeah.
Start raining harder, start raining lighter.
Yeah.
And then they speed up. I was like, every lap, condition changes.
Yeah.
And they can drive on the limit every lap because they're faster. You know, the top guys is faster than the bottom, 10 or whatever they are. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, how can you tell the condition changing that dramatically?
Yeah.
You know how to drive on the limit.
Yeah, and really what they're doing there is they're doing this very, very fast feedback loop I'm sure we've spoken about, where they're trying to make the car go somewhere, and they're judging, did it do what I told it to, or how close to my input did the car react? Did it do what I told it to perfectly? If yes, then probably I could have carried more speed and turned even harder. If no, then you know the grip level's low, and you know you're already at or over the limit. And so they're trying all the time, and they're receiving all the information from, they're doing the driving, they're turning the wheel. When I turn this fast, does it turn towards the apex? Not quite as well as I wanted. Okay, it's still not grippy enough. And they'll just adjust the speed that they're willing to carry into each corner based on this. But it's happening, I don't know how many times. I don't know what the frequency is, but tens of times per second probably. they're getting this information, even though it's completely subconscious. Like, no F1 driver is driving around thinking, oh, this corner is quite wet, maybe slightly wetter than last time. I'll try a bit more steering. They're not doing any of that. They're just driving, and their brain is receiving the how well is the car responding to my inputs information. And they're adjusting in real time based on that. It's just, when you're newer to it, it has to be more conscious. I'm sure we've spoken about that before. But,
Yeah. And now I will practice if we have a minute, right? Like, I basically want to ask you, like, thank you for all the things you talked about earlier. What should I focus on to practice? I'm trying to do a
yeah.
sample right myself.
Yeah. So,
Go ahead.
yeah. I'm going to write this down as we're talking. So I know we haven't gone over any of your data at all, but let's just, in fact, I haven't even got a single lap of your data here, have I? This is, let's get rid of this. This is from, oh no, this was 2 hours ago. Yeah, did you just do this lap? 32.0? No, you've done oh no, that's me. 32.3. Yeah, let me just add it, just so we've got something from this session. And then I'll just make note, even though I'm not making notes on specific parts of the track. So, where are we? We're down. Oh no, it is up here. This one. Is this us here? Testing. That's not it. Why can't I find it here? Is it this one? Hang on, I can figure this out. You did a 35.0, 34.5. Ah, because it didn't show up because you must have had a pit lane speeding penalty or something like that to begin with. Let's just take this one anyway. Oh no, but hang on, but you got 32.0 there. Sorry, Jing, this is 32. You did a 32.353 on lap 9. Yeah, I think it is. You're not still in the cockpit, are you? No, okay. I think it's this one. It's this one. Here we go. It was, for some reason, it was just the other way around. Right, okay, so let's just make some notes. I'll just, like, write them here. Okay, so, things to focus on. Okay, so this is the really basic way of putting it, but I'm going to write it basically and then we can expand on it. Lift your vision. This is like the standard race driver coach phrase that I hear people say. Specifically, even more specifically, look at the next place you want the car to go. Right, so the process is I've never written this down before, but this is great. And now I can copy that without having to type it again. Yeah. I'll make that one note. Right, so hopefully that makes sense. Although this hasn't done it in lines, annoyingly. It's written that as one big sentence. But you saw me do it anyway. You're looking into the distance, and even before it's actually visible. So like when I was rising up the hill towards that, the apex we focused on for a while there with the braking points, I know it's over there somewhere because I've driven the track and I know it's a right-hander. So I'm looking there, and that means the moment it actually appears, you can then focus on it. So you're visually searching for that next place, even if it's really far into the distance. Because the further ahead you're looking, the better you've got a sense of is the car wandering or am I going straight to that place? You know, you've got quite a good reference. If you're looking down at the front of the car, you're not necessarily tracing the most ideal line towards the next place you're going, because it's almost like, it's a bit like being in too lower gear, if that makes sense. It's like, it's too easy to be like jerky with steering and stuff if you're focused too nearby. It all smooths out. The further into the distance you look, it gives you mental time to assess the geometry of what's happening and make that kind of calculation of, it feels like I'm going this fast, that's where I want to go, this is the angle of the corner. All those things, you've got more driving brain time to figure them out.
And it helps you with the counter steering when you want to spin.
Yep.
First spin better when you get your steering. Your steering is always towards.
It's like the steering wheel is locked to the next place. Yeah, exactly. Also, it helps you in racing situations. If someone's having an accident up in front, you see it much earlier and you get to react to it sooner. I see so many people crash into another car in real life and in the sim. And when I'm watching back the replay, I'm like, how did you not see that? Like, I saw that happen. I saw that guy was going to spin. I saw him spin. I saw where his car was going. And I'd already planned a route around him. And you just drove straight into him. I think that's also part of this in the specific racing situations. So that's it. I think we should keep it simple. I think this would be a great thing to focus on. Now, this doesn't need to be on a particular track. You can do this on any track. You know, you could start off with a simple track, like a Formula One style flat. You know, Cadwell Park is bloody hard to do this on because it's so narrow and it's like corner, 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 corner. If you've got something a bit like the Hungara Ring or Silverstone or Nürburgring Grand Prix, something that you might be familiar with that's like a bit more simple in terms of the layout, that has probably more obvious what corner's coming next, that kind of thing. That'll be a good starting point. And maybe not this car, maybe a car which is more settled, that you're not gonna have to keep saving it all the time. It doesn't matter that much, but any car you can do this in. It's just, if you're focusing on this visual thing, you might not want to have to deal with a car that's also quite tricky whilst you're getting used to it. But
I see, like I go to like a super Formula Light. It's like really easy.
yeah. We should do that. Let's do that. And I'll tell you what, if you do practice that and you settle on a track that you've been doing it on, let's take a look at that next time. Let's like do a recap. I'd love to hear how you've got on with trying this, because it's something that I've never experienced having to consciously do. So but I know drivers do sometimes have to consciously do it when they're learning. So it'd be interesting to hear how it helped or made things harder or whatever. So do we want to book another session in now whilst I've got some availability in the calendar? Let me just check. Yeah, okay. Yeah. That's